Hi guys, I'm Mike.
And I'm Stephen.
And this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back to the Race Review podcast, where after the dust has settled, we take a deeper look at the action from last weekend's race, which was obviously our second of our doubleheader at Austria. And still a very good race, I thought.
Yeah, lots of midfield action, I think it's fair to say. Again, the leader dominated. Last week it was Bottas, this week it was Hamilton. But yeah, had some good battles in there as well.
I think we'd predicted in the preview that it probably was likely Mercedes were going to run away with it. You'd back them. They didn't have any gearbox issues. Go from there. But anyway, with the Race Review podcast, what we'll do is we'll go through each individual team and obviously talk about the main talking points around those teams surrounded from the weekend and the race. And yeah, kind of give our thoughts and views in a little bit more detail than we would have done in the kind of race live reaction on Sunday. And then we did give our driver of the day before rounding off with what we gave the race rating, see how it compared to last week's race. And yeah, then we throw it to you and see what you guys want to kind of come up with in the comments to carry the discussion on. But should we start, Steve?
Yeah.
I think so.
Shall I get things started with Williams?
I think so.
Okay, Williams. P11 last week. Hopes were high, especially after George Russell's qualifying. Starting in P11, could this be the week that Williams get points on merit? No. Russell battling against Magnussen made a mistake and ran wide at turn 5, and that was basically the last we saw of the Williams, because yet again, other than Gasly's struggles that we'll come on to later, they were occupying the back end of the field. And it was slightly disappointing. The mistake from Russell was disappointing, but then he still came back and beat Latifi, which makes Latifi's race even more disappointing because he didn't really do anything. I think it's fair to say. Obviously, in a Williams, underperforming Williams, it's difficult to do anything, but still get beaten by your teammate after they went to the back of the grid.
Made a mistake, which I imagine probably did some sort of damage to Russell's car performance-wise.
Yeah, tough day for Williams after a positive result last week. Not so positive this week.
I think, look, it's going to require a very good driver performance, which obviously George Russell is capable of doing, to get them in the points or be at least competing with the guys up. Obviously, the first week he had that retirement with an engine problem. In this week, it was obviously, a driver mistake. It is tough, but George Russell is really driving the edge of that Williams. And unfortunately, it didn't come off from this week. And Latifi, I think, is still quietly treading his feet into Formula One. It's been a long time coming for him to kind of get this step. I don't think he's going to be brash about it. And I realise he's probably in a team with Williams that, they can't afford to be going hell for leather, because every mistake, every kind of crash is probably quite an expensive mistake for them and would put pressure on the team, certainly. So I guess with Nicholas, he's been a little bit cautious with his entry. It's going to be a few races before we can start having an accurate judgment, I think, of whether Nicholas Latifi can be F1 worthy.
He is a rookie at the end of the day, but still want to see more from him, and hopefully we will.
Absolutely. So we'll move on to Haas. And Haas, again, qualifying wise, 16th and 15th, I think they were. It sounds about right.
Yes.
From there, Magnussen was definitely 15th. I'm not sure if Grosjean was actually no, Grosjean was 20th, wasn't he?
He started from the pit lane.
He didn't. Yeah. Well, he qualified 20th anyway, because he looked like he had brake issues in the rain anyway. But yeah, so they didn't have a great qualifying, but in the race, Magnussen had a great start again. Then he seemed to kind of suffer some floor damage. he fell back, but fought his way back up until 12th. And Grosjean kind of mixed some mistakes. I don't know if he was having issues with the brakes. He really doesn't look happy with this Haas car this year. Sure, it's certainly Magnussen seems to be coming to better grips with the Haas. But the interview afterwards, I believe Kevin Magnussen was saying that he was positive about, he was saying we managed to finish 12th and that was with the damaged floor, so I don't think the points are out of question.
No.
So that's got to be positive for Haas. They've solved their tyre issues. They need to solve these kind of brake issues. But if they do that, I certainly think that Haas may be competing with AlphaTauri for those last kind of few points, like the 1 or 2 points brackets, which compared to the 2019 season they had, which was awful, I think would be a really positive step for Haas.
Definitely. But yeah, they're still struggling with that Ferrari-powered engine, like all the cars are. But yes, Magnussen making the best of a bad situation. Moving on to Alfa Romeo, I think next, the other Ferrari-powered engine. Kimi finishing P11 is actually a pretty underrated, I think, performance there. Best of the Ferrari-powered cars. After last week's retirement, of course, where the wheel nut came out. Giovinazzi, though, a bit of a disappointing weekend for him, finishing behind the Haas's. Was it 15th in the end?
No,
16th?
I think Pierre Gasly finished 15th, so I think Giovinazzi might have finished P14.
Oh, okay. P14. Yeah. Being by his teammate, I don't know.
I think he struggled from, obviously, he spun out in qualifying in Q1, which obviously brought the red flag and early finish there. I don't know if there was damage that then affected the setup. In terms of, I don't know if he just couldn't find the same setup that worked so well for him the week before. But yeah, it was a disappointing performance from Gio. And when Robert Schwartzman has started so well off in Formula 2 and Mick Schumacher and Callum Ilott have shown promise in there. Callum Ilott definitely feels like he might be on the verge. Ferrari Juniors, Marcus Armstrong's obviously going to be in with a shout there. If
bit of pressure on that Alpha seat.
Exactly. If 2 of 4 of those guys, well, 1 for definite, I feel Robert Schwartzman will probably, by early signs, look like he might make that top 3. It's going to be pressure on Gio, and unfortunately he can't really afford to have too many days like he did on Sunday.
Well, they're going to rather partner a young guy up with a more experienced driver like Kimi Räikkönen than Giovinazzi. He's not showing too much experience out there at the moment.
Well, exactly. He's got to outperform Kimi. That if Kimi wants to stay on, Alfa Romeo have to go, actually, no, we want to go with Giovinazzi rather than... Because remember, one of those Ferrari seats belong to... Well, one of those Alfa seats belong to Ferrari. So they can be ruthless. They then promote Giovinazzi up. He could quite easily kind of be cut out of the sport. In place of one of the other youngsters coming through, and Kimi Räikkönen then is in the Alpha seat. He has to beat Kimi Räikkönen, and he did it week 1. Still got more points than him technically in the championship. Yeah. So that's a positive, but he's certainly got to maintain a consistent level of performance. He's got to find that.
Yeah.
Probably. Who should we move on to next? Should we go?
Just round up the Ferrari cars.
Yeah, I was going to say, because Ferrari had such a poor weekend, it probably is a good point to kind of get them out the way early. So, Ferrari. As said in the driver ratings yesterday with Stephen, it was difficult to rate their race because it lasted 3 corners. Sebastian Vettel, very poor start, which led to George Russell overtaking him. His teammate was all over the back of him, who was meant to start behind him in P11, but had a 3-place grid penalty, so started P14, I believe, but was all over the back of Vettel. But Vettel was fighting other cars going into turn 3. There were already, I think, 2 or 3 cars abreast going into the corner. No space for Leclerc. That doesn't stop Charles. Charles decides that he's going to try and lunge on the inside. Silly move. Bumps over the apex because there is no space there. The rear end of his car ends up sliding across the back of Sebastian Vettel's Ferrari, taking out his rear wing, which obviously causes terminal damage for Vettel, who manages to get it back to the pits, but obviously his race was over. Charles Leclerc went in the pits and did go out, but he suffered floor damage, which basically was terminal, and he retired as well. So both Ferraris, I think, were out by the end of lap 2.
Yeah, that incident brings a new meaning to all over the back of Vettel. Leclerc literally was all over the back of Sebastian Vettel.
Look, Ferrari are in a poor state. They rushed these upgrades through. We don't really know where they were pace-wise compared. From qualifying, I know it was wet qualifying, but it didn't necessarily look like they had any. But then again, Racing Points looked terrible in the wet qualifying, and then Lance Stroll said you could argue it was the second quickest car out there in the hands of Sergio Perez. That was maybe potentially definitely the case on that, because he flew through the field, which we'll obviously talk about when we get to Racing Point. But yeah, Ferrari, they've had a terrible start to the season, and it is already, it seems stupid saying it 2 races in, but it kind of feels like 2020 is already a write-off for Ferrari.
Yeah, they're gonna need to bring something to Hungary. Well, not upgrades, but they're gonna have to bring a performance to Hungary to actually go, we can compete with the midfield. Full stop. Even challenging for podiums. If they don't show anything at Hungary, then 2020's already over for them, really.
And I guess we still don't really know where Ferrari are, because week 1 kind of plastered over the cracks, because Charles got that P2 and podium, but obviously benefited heavily from safety cars. Sebastian Vettel spun and ended up P10, having no pace at all. We haven't really seen a clean race from Ferrari to go, okay, that's where they fit into the picture. We can guess it. It looks they might even be as low as maybe 6th or 7th fastest car out there. They're probably, here we go, probably Mercedes, Red Bull, Racing Point, McLaren, Renault, Ferrari.
Yeah.
Probably where it stands at the moment. But we don't really know where they are, but it does really look terrible for Ferrari. But we move on to those, used to be called Toro Rosso. I still think this was the better livery. I don't care what people say. This was the better livery.
Poor AlphaTauri. They try to do something new, reinvent themselves.
They try and do something new and then copy Alfa Romeo. At least they're better than Alfa Romeo. But that's about the only thing that's improved
brand.
it.
You can't question their,
I am. They need to get chrome back in an F1 car. The colours.
Oh, that would be nice.
The colours worked very well.
But Pierre Gasly, you touched on it earlier. He had an early stop and went on to hards, and that really seemed to sabotage his race, really. Didn't get any pace out of them, was stuck at the back fighting the Williams, and he kind of stayed there for the rest of the race. I think they made a late change onto mediums. But
I think it was soft. I think he went hard soft.
But he still can catch the Haas's or Alphas. After an impressive display managing those brakes last week, I think he got a bit messed up by the strategy this week. The Kvyat came home with a point. It's only a point, but for AlphaTauri, that's quite a big point, I would say. Pretty much stayed out of trouble, drove a solid race. Was quicker than the Ferrari powered cars, but not really in competition with the midfield of Renault, McLaren and Racing Point. But solid point return for Kvyat.
Yeah, I mean, we keep saying it in terms of, I certainly do, in terms of they're just a bit nowhere. Yeah. I don't know what AlphaTauri are this season. That sounds really harsh, but they had a great platform finishing P6 in the constructors, but they've kind of seemed to stay where they were, where Renault, Racing Point clearly and McLaren have all improved again. So it's a bit like, I mean, we did know that last year their position was a little bit inflated due to those podiums that obviously Kvyat got in Germany and Gasly got in Brazil. But still, they look like they were a little bit more competitive than what they are currently. It does just seem a little bit... Yeah, but maybe Austria isn't the track for them.
Maybe, yeah. They'll be hoping so. They're quicker than the Ferraris, but they're just not close to that midfield.
But maybe it's an interesting thing, actually, that the Honda power unit, maybe it's a good example of that. Because maybe the Honda power unit is only the third best power unit on the grid. Maybe the Renault power unit is better.
Yeah.
Because Mercedes is clearly still the best, number one. Well, it was Ferrari last year, but make of that what you will. Ferrari, for me, are now the bottom engine. And I think Honda are probably below Renault in terms of out-and-out power, if we compare where AlphaTauri are.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why Red Bull can't compete with Mercedes, because in terms of power, it's just not on a level that they can match, because the aero maybe is a little bit tough, but they're clearly lacking somewhere on Mercedes. And, AlphaTauri and Red Bull have the same engine. Maybe that's the one where they're losing quite a bit of ground on Mercedes.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah. We'll move on to the next one, and that is Renault. And I would say, although they've again had another one of their cars retire with issues with overheating cooling, last week it was Ricciardo, this week was Ocon. I suppose the real worry for them, the car, was it didn't really seem to get any sort of performance out of the soft tyre, because I don't know how early Ocon's problem started, but Ricciardo was quite quickly all over the back of him.
On the mediums.
Yeah, on the harder compound. And then Ricciardo struggled, even though he was on the softer compound to McLaren and Racing Point, he struggled to find any real pace from that kind of softer compound, and did very well to defend. So, yeah, I think it was more of a positive step, because in the hands of Ricciardo, Ocon had a very good qualifying. He seemed to kind of get off the rust a little bit in that qualifying performance. We know in the wet that Ocon has in the past found an extra level of performance and done well. I think he qualified a Force India in P3 at Spa before. I think that's the one that's coming to mind. Might be wrong on that one. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments down below. But in the hands of Ricciardo, who is up to speed and obviously in his second season with Renault, it does look like a decent car that at least can fight with the McLarens, and if the strategy gets right and they kind of iron out their problems, it certainly is a competitive car in that midfield battle, and potentially it's an opportunity here if they really get it together in the second half of the season, or in subsequent races. They could potentially even be, if Ocon steps up, maybe third in the constructors if they have a really good run.
I think that third place is up for grabs, as we've seen with Ferrari. Someone's got to go for it. At the moment, it's looking like Racing Point. If they just put the full performances together, they're in the run-in for that third place. But yeah, Renault and McLaren, it's open.
Certainly is. So Renault, they're still a bit... don't know where they are, but I think they look a better outfit than what they did last year.
Yeah, I think it's more positive for them.
They definitely seem to have gone in an upward trajectory in the right direction. But McLaren?
Yeah, McLaren. Again, another late surge by Lando Norris. Somehow finishes best of the rest. Not quite a podium this week, but a very impressive fifth. Probably it's not unfair to say it was very fortunate. Or maybe not very fortunate, but fortunate. He benefited off the Lance Stroll and Daniel Ricciardo clash in the second to last lap or third to last lap. And then he also benefited off the Perez-Albon clash, which wrecked Perez's front wing and allowed Lando to catch him right on the last corner. So yes, impressive late surge by Lando Norris. But if those incidents don't happen, McLaren were eighth and ninth, which doesn't look as great as fifth and ninth. Yeah, they just struggled. Sainz obviously had a big mistake in the pit stops. 7 seconds, so about 5 seconds lost in the pit stops. But still, he struggled in that second half of the race for pace. I think he said on radio that he'd ruined his tyres too early, pushed them too hard. And Lando, with that grid penalty, put him in ninth. He didn't really do a lot other than he beat Sainz. He was quicker than Sainz, which allowed him to get past on team orders, and he had the pace to take advantage of any mistakes. But it was a bit... I think McLaren got away with one this week.
They've certainly benefited a lot from it. And
yeah.
I think the interesting one for me, I think McLaren are quite an interesting one to look at and debate now. They're one of the most interesting teams, I think, from these first couple of races. Because on one lap pace, they're very good.
Yeah.
Like, they have both the fastest laps, I'm pretty sure. Did Lewis get it in the end?
Oh, I'm not sure.
But yeah, or did Max get it in the end? I can't. But obviously,
3 of them going for it.
Genuinely on pace, Lando Norris had it, and I'm pretty sure Carlos Sainz went for it as well.
Yeah, because they pitted Sainz late. So yeah,
and I think Sainz did get the fastest lap. So they genuinely have a very quick car, and their chassis was good from last year. They've clearly built on that. It's clearly a solid car. But I just think at the moment, actually in race pace, it's lacking definitely behind the Racing Point, but we'll come on to Racing Point and the reasons behind that I might be. But in race pace as well, I think it also might be lacking behind the Renault.
Because Ricciardo was miles ahead after his pit stop when he was in fighting the Racing Points.
And obviously he benefited from that pit stop from Carlos Sainz. I know I was talking to Rox on Twitter about this, and she thought that that massively affected his race because he then fell back into traffic. He then had to push hard to get through the traffic. Now, I just think Carlos Sainz has had quite a slow start to the season. He's been all right, but he's certainly not the Carlos Sainz yet that we saw last season. And Lando Norris, I don't know if it's just been elevated because Lando Norris has got the kind of standout results.
Yeah.
And their levels are pretty similar. And obviously, Lando has benefited both times from team orders letting him through.
And last few laps incidents.
But yeah, I think McLaren, a lot of people are getting excited about where McLaren are because obviously they're second in the Constructors, and Lando Norris is P3 in the championship after 2 races. But I just think... obviously, we expect Red Bull, I think, by the end of the season to be second and Max Verstappen to be third.
Yeah.
I think in the championship. I think that's probably the likely order we'll see. But yeah, I don't know with McLaren where they actually are. I wouldn't have them nailed down for third.
No.
But Racing Point, we'll move on to. So yeah. Racing Point. Stephen. Thoughts on Racing Point?
Racing Point's your team.
Checo! Okay, Checo. I'll go with Racing Point. So Racing, you just want to do Red Bull.
Well, I did McLaren.
Did you? I can't even keep up with this. This is the problem with the teams back and forth. You're going, Racing Point, it's my team. So, well, the big drama, obviously, from it was, well, in the wet weather, their setup clearly didn't work. Lance Stroll does seem to do better in wet qualifying. Sergio Perez, for some reason, the past couple of years hasn't traditionally been that good in the wet. I say past couple of years, Germany 2019 and this qualifying. We haven't really had many rain-affected things.
No.
So it's difficult to kind of judge on that front. But yeah, Sergio Perez qualified all the way down in P17. He made his way through the field and was the main excitement from the race, definitely. I think, within the first 10 laps or so, he was up to like P12. Then he'd kind of worked his way into the points. Then he was catching up with all the Renaults, McLarens and his teammates. was making kind of mincemeat of that, and then spent kind of the last part of the race chasing down the gap between Alex Albon, spending a lot of the time in the DRS zone, which was the only fight that we didn't really kind of get some good on-screen action about. Went for a late move, lost his front wing, well, not completely, but damaged his front wing that he had kind of serious aero damage and lack of performance there, and finished P6, obviously, with Lando Norris claiming that. And Lance Stroll started P12 with Charles Leclerc's penalty, worked his way up to finish P7 in the end. A very solid performance from him, and I think, you know, Lance's levels of performance are improving now. You know, there's always going to be critics of him. There's critics of he's only in F1 because of his dad's money. Look, what you got with Lance, he has clearly benefited from a level, but there is a level of talent with him. He's not exceptional. He's not going to be a world champion. This is like 10 years down the line, and Lance Stroll's gained a world championship. He is only 20.
Only gained one world championship.
Oh dear. But no, he doesn't feel like that type of driver, but he does feel there are those number 2 drivers in Formula 1, and he definitely feels like he's very good at driving that 80% competent level of, you know...
That 80% competent.
Well,
what's 20%?
The
20% incompetent.
No, the extra 20% is the kind of top class, the ones who are driving 100, maybe even beyond that, in terms of what Max got from the car, what Lewis gets from the car, what Perez got from the car in the Racing Point. Lance is just a very steady, consistent driver, which probably would make him a very good endurance driver, but that's probably a debate for another time. But yeah, Perez was unbelievable, and it was a shame. They probably go away from the first couple of races, funnily enough, probably quite disappointed.
Yeah, missed a podium opportunity last week that really should have been theirs. Then this week, lost out on 5th at the end, and possibly 4th.
Just couldn't find a way past. But I think probably the main, Racing Point post-race, Renault put in a complaint, and it was very specific, I think, about the brake ducts. And then there was Sam Collins, who goes on the Formula 1 YouTube. I think it was on the segment of Will Buxton's kind of the paddock pass, I think afterwards this was on. But basically, I'll try and sum it up quickly. In law, there's precedent that if Racing Point have a car that is found to be 70% or more similar to the Mercedes, then even if the Mercedes aren't protesting it or going against it, then legally that design is Mercedes, and Racing Point would have to change the car. Or in this instance, I think they're specifically looking at the brake ducts, which Renault have just very targeted on a very similar thing. And even if they did the brake ducts, I think that would be something that's a little bit fundamental that could affect the performance of that Racing Point, or at least bring it a little bit closer to that Renault, is what they're hoping for. Racing Point, you read it today to me in terms of they released a very strong statement. So this is today, so yesterday for you guys watching the video, basically saying they're insulted, I think, pretty much by this.
What are you doing, Renault?
Yeah, and I think that was everyone's gut instinct, because everything that's said on Sky Sports is basically every step of the way Racing Point have done in building this car. It has been greenlit by the FIA, the technical director Tom Barzi himself, going, this car's okay. What you're doing is legitimate and it's all right. You've proven that there is enough significant difference between. I mean, the most obvious, I think, difference between them is the side pods where it goes in. That's a very clear one. If you put the W11, W10 and RP20 next to each other, that's quite a clear difference for me. But yeah, anyway.
And the stewards are unlikely to probably go against the FIA's judgment.
Absolutely. Yeah. But rambled on, I think we've covered that. But basically, Racing Point, if there was one team that I wanted a nail on, if this all gets cleared, it all goes okay, there's no issues with it, then Racing Point do look very quick. And potentially, if they improve that car, that they could even be potentially being quicker than a Red Bull, or at least one of the Red Bulls, with that Mercedes engine in their car as well. But that's Racing Point. Red Bull.
Red Bull. Max Verstappen. Much better week than last week, purely on the fact that both cars finished. Second and fourth. No, I keep saying second and fourth. Third and fourth. The Mercedes are still far superior to the Red Bull. You can't see them challenging for a race win unless some big upgrades come in for Red Bull. But it's points. Albon, though, is the troubling one, finishing only about 10 seconds off Max in the end. But obviously Max pitted, so if Max didn't pit, that gap's probably about 30 seconds, which is massive. This is like Pierre Gasly at the start of last year kind of gap between teammates. And
the only positive for Albon is he didn't get lapped.
Yeah, I just don't know. It's 30 seconds. I just don't know what to say to that. Albon needs to find something. Maybe his mindset wasn't quite right for this week. Maybe he just needs Austria out of his system and hopefully picks himself up for Hungary. But I presume it's a mental problem because we haven't heard anything about car issues with that Red Bull. He just needs to... Because if that gap continues, if it's a consistent thing, 30 seconds off, Red Bull probably going to be looking for a new number 2.
Yeah. First I'm going to be positive with Max Verstappen to even split the Mercedes for such a long time. Yeah. And he probably would have carried on to split them if he hadn't have got that little bit of front wing damage during the race, which it looked like Valtteri Bottas would catch Verstappen on the last lap. But then when that front wing damage came, he caught him within like a couple of laps. So that was quite a significant aero problem.
Yeah, you never know. I think Max was losing grip on his tyres as well. But
you don't know because he did pit earlier, and obviously Bottas's tyres were always going to have more grip come the end. That's true. I think Max was a little bit frustrated by the strategy pitting so early compared to the Mercedes as well, because I think he felt like he had grip on the softs that he could have gone longer. He very much felt like a very dejected figure, and I already heard Rox, I think, stating on Twitter that the performance clause being muted around Max Verstappen and maybe looking at a Mercedes seat, because he didn't look a happy boy, and I don't think he's going to be. He wants to compete. He knows that he's got the talent to compete at the top, but I think he's fed up of turning up to a new season, the Red Bull being off the pace of Mercedes, and just struggling on that front.
Yeah, I think Red Bull's never started seasons well, but you'd thought for Austria, a circuit they have done well in the last 2 years, their performance may have been there, but they're well off the pace.
And Alex Albon. Okay. Alex Albon. I'm going to do this because, look, Alex Albon is a lovely guy. I don't think there is a nicer guy in Formula 1. How he comes across in his interviews, he's humble. He was clearly very hurt by the situation. I think it mentally did affect him for this race, and he kind of needs to brush himself down and kind of, chin up. These things happen. Racing is racing. You're going to have incidents like that. You can't be too hard on yourself and feel like, it's never going to happen for me. I think we need to seriously look at Alexander Albon and stop saying that he's having a great start to Red Bull. He's had an okay start to Red Bull. What you give him licence for in the back end of last year was the fact that he didn't get a pre-season testing with Red Bull, but he did get announced very early in that summer break, didn't he? But, he wouldn't have had...
very good performance at Spa in his first race, but
But obviously coming from the back. He's beat Max Verstappen twice, but that was in Monza where Max started from the back, and then obviously had that kind of front wing damage, I think, from the start as well. And also in Mexico where Max had that clash with Valtteri Bottas, and I think he got a puncture, or he at least suffered some damage. The overtake didn't work, I remember going through the grandstand section. Can't remember what goes wrong. And he hasn't, for me, really beaten anyone on track that he shouldn't already be beating. He hasn't really competed against any of the top team drivers. And last week, people go, Brazil 2019, he almost got a podium. Well, yeah, but Bottas and both Ferraris retired, and that was the only really thing, and it was a safety car that kind of put him in that position. What about last week in the first Austria race? Well, he was still nowhere near the Mercedes and pitted because Red Bull nailed their strategy. He was on a fresh set of softs. Mercedes were on, used hard tyres, so a compound 2 times harder than his soft compound there. He realistically should have been competing with the Mercedes, and he fluffed the move in terms of, yes, you can say he's a little bit unlucky. I know Hamilton received the penalty, but I said the more I look at it, it seems like it's racing. You kind of risk it on the outside. You can't really be too upset if it doesn't work out. I think Alex Albon still has a lot to prove in Formula 1, and I think rose-tinted glasses need to come off about him and start kind of seriously looking at his performances, because that was really poor. And I think we gave him a 4 out of 10. Some excuses were coming. Maybe he was told to just play it safe and hold position, but it doesn't make sense why the Racing Point would get so close to him if he was just managing, because then they would have gone, Racing Point's getting close, push. Okay, push. Yeah. And he would have gone from there. He just genuinely, pace wasn't there. And I remember talking to Rox on Twitter. I've mentioned Rox a lot in this, but she's a very big Red Bull fan, and so the incidents tend to talk on there. So, yeah, with Alex, she was saying his mannerisms, how he's going, it tends to be a little bit how Pierre Gasly started being in the first half of the season last year. So that would be a big worry for Red Bull, because if Alex goes mentally in the head, we're definitely, I think, going to be looking at a new Red Bull driver in 2021. He needs a big race in Hungary, I think. Yeah. Definitely. But that's Red Bull done. Sorry, Alex. I do like you. I think you're nice, but your performances do need to up on the track.
Vettel's been getting in his head, trying to free up that second seat.
I like Red Bull. The guy at Red Bull says bring Sebastian home. Apparently, that's the rumours that's been going about. He's told Red Bull that they need to bring Sebastian home. Very interesting. I think we're a long way away from that, and Christian Horner definitely said no. But like we say, Red Bull and the word no doesn't necessarily have the same meaning for most people. Yeah. Mercedes. Where do you start with Mercedes? Credible car that they've built, the W11. Gearbox issues in week 1. Gearbox issues appear to have gone. They didn't really have any things, not that they were particularly pressed, but I suppose Bottas had to push to catch Max Verstappen.
Yeah, I think Toto did say the gearbox issues was no longer a problem for them.
And they said they still were worried about the suspension, but the suspension pretty much held up. They didn't really have any issues on that. Lewis Hamilton, 1.2 seconds ahead of anyone else in qualifying, well, clear of second place in qualifying in the wet. Incredible performance, incredibly kind of like stamping his legacy as one of the greatest ever to drive in the sport. I think it will be one of those qualifying sessions I looked back at. In the race, he knows his car's so good. He was quicker than Valtteri Bottas last week, and he was catching, I think, and it would have been interesting to see how they would have raced with Valtteri leading from the front. But he basically, the closest anyone got to him was Max Verstappen starting next to him on the grid.
Yep, and after that, no. But a safety car brought them within that close distance again. And then it was a lap later, no. I don't think Max was ever in DRS range of Lewis, because by the time it was activated, Lewis was gone.
It seems stupid to say it 2 races in, because everything's gone, but just from what we've seen of Lewis, how his performance has been with Mercedes, I'd be happy walking down to the bookies and putting some serious money on him winning his 7th world title this season. I think that Mercedes is comfortably, they don't have a third team pushing them, that they have to fight and combat at tracks. They just literally have a great car. Lewis Hamilton is clear. Do I think Valtteri Bottas can challenge him over a season? I mean, he's not done bad. He's leading the championship currently with a P1 and a P2. It could be an interesting title fight. Yeah. I could be wrong. I hope it is, because we haven't had a serious title fight since Rosberg won the title in 2016. But
you'd think Bottas is the only one to push him.
And I don't know if he's got it. There's just something in me with Bottas that goes, I don't know if you've just got that little bit extra. I don't know if he's got the mind games that he can get in Lewis's head like Nico did. But Mercedes, it's a pretty easy one to say because they smashed it.
Yeah, absolutely dominated it. Between the two, it was a bit of a disappointing. Obviously, Bottas starting in fourth, he was the only one that can challenge Lewis at the moment. He didn't really challenge Lewis at all. Getting past Max towards the end, never put any pressure on. So Lewis just, beautifully controlled.
I think what we've got to hope for this season, the midfield sorted. We're going to have amazing races in the midfield, and in the odds performance, Max is going to be able to fight those Mercedes and do something. What we've got to hope is Valtteri finds Bottas 3.0, whatever they want to kind of don him as this season, and we've got to hope that we get that wheel-to-wheel action at the front of the race, because I think we've just kind of finished off watching the second IndyCar race from Road America.
Yeah.
And, it was a fight for the leads between Felix Rosenqvist and Pato O'Ward. And that was just great, because there's something a little bit extra about a fight that's the fight for a race lead. And if we get, if we lose that all season again, it's going to be, I think, pretty tough to take that one.
Yeah. And Bottas he has his favourite tracks. Austria is his favourite track, so he probably would have been hoping for a double race win. But he's going to have to find something at Hamilton's strongholds, as they were, like Silverstone, Hungary. Yeah.
I mean, Bottas, it's not beyond belief to believe that he could win in Silverstone, because it was only strategy that mucked him up last year at Silverstone. Hungary, we never really got a chance. He locked up in the first few corners, then lost his front wing to Charles Leclerc, didn't he? Which then buggered his race pretty much from there. Maybe, potentially, but I think that's what we've got to hope for, essentially. We've got to hope for Valtteri Bottas to step up his game and to push Lewis Hamilton all the way, which is all we can hope for. Otherwise, I think Lewis has got it wrapped up and in the bag.
Yeah.
Right. On to our driver. Oh, no. Before we go on to driver for the day, of course, our new feature of the podcast, which is the roundup of the junior series, kind of like F1's Stars of Tomorrow. Obviously, we had 2 F3 and 2 F2 races again. The first F3 race was massively restricted. I think it was only 15 laps in the end, which was won by Frederick Vesti, his first win of this season. The Prema team in F3 just looks so good. Like, Prema basically have a stronghold on that category. It is probably going to be one of their 2 drivers between Logan Sargent, Oscar Piastri, who looks the early favourite to me, and Frederick Vesti fighting for that title. And in the wet, he did well. He did a fantastic pole lap on the Friday to lead the race, and never kind of looks back on that one, but only 15 laps. And then the sprint race on Sunday looked like the first week's sprint race was won by Liam Lawson, but in a kind of race-long fight between Jake Hughes and Liam Lawson, fighting for the lead, exchanging positions in terms of that. Liam Lawson and, Jake Hughes was going round the outside, turn 4 again. Always that trusty turn 4 at Austria at the moment. Front wheels collide, both suspensions give in. Hughes out, Lawson out. Porsche, who had started on pole with the reverse grid, how it started, had done very well to defend P3, and because it was so late, this kind of safety car, managed to win his first ever F3 race behind safety car, but that won't bother Théo Pourchaire at all. The young Frenchman, who is very talented, certainly would be relieved to get his first one on there. Then the F2 feature race took part in very wet conditions again on the full wet tyres, And Robert Schwartzman was able to claim his first victory, the F2 rookie. A lot of hype had been around Robert Schwartzman, and he is still the championship leader, I believe, going into the third round in Hungary. A very strong start to the season by him. A podium and a race win under his belt. The sprint race didn't go as well, the first retiree from the race. But denying Yuki Tsunoda as the team's radio cut out and he had to stay out an extra lap, and Robert Schwartzman's there, but obviously he dedicated, very sad, Robert Schwartzman lost his dad during the coronavirus break and dedicated that race win to his dad. So that was his first win since his dad passed away. So that was a very emotional day for Robert Schwartzman, but a very good drive for him. The sprint race was won by Christian Lundgaard, a Renault junior who is now second in the championship with ART. Obviously, the Renault juniors were all in the kind of news over the build-up over it because Fernando Alonso was announced for Renault, and a lot of people were very angry that this was basically overlooking the Renault Junior Academy. The only way they can put pressure on is by winning, and Zhou didn't have necessarily the best weekends, but Christian Lundgaard, on the other hand, second in the championship, pretty good.
Yeah.
But my junior of the weekend was Robert Schwartzman with that win in the feature race. A very emotional win and a very strong race from Guy, coming in with a lot of hype into this F2 season, being a rookie, and he certainly is living up to that hype at the moment. So he is my performer of the weekend from there. Driver of the day, Stephen.
Oh, I was just touching on the feeder series. Is that all 4 new race winners?
Yep.
Yeah, jeez. Very competitive in the feeder series.
It has been a very competitive season so far, and I believe all 4 different winners in F2 as well.
Jeez, yeah. So, but I'm sure after 4 times going round the Red Bull ring, they're probably quite happy it's Hungary next.
Absolutely.
But yes, driver of the day, and I'm going to give it to... There's 2. I know who you're going to pick. So I'll pick Lewis Hamilton for dominating the weekend. Yes, he's in the fastest car, but he managed... It was just a classic Lewis race. Just managed it all. Brilliant qualifying, even better than brilliant, outstanding qualifying, and he just controlled the race. No one put any pressure on him because they couldn't. And who's your driver of the day?
Well, Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, and probably Daniel Ricciardo even probably come into play on this one. Max Verstappen extracted every inch out of that Red Bull for me and really kind of fought at the top. Lando Norris again, affectionately kind of named by Zach Brown, a last lap Lando, for kind of obviously, you know, the previous week getting the fastest lap to get him on the podium, and this week going from 7th to 5th on the last lap, which was a very kind of strong performance from him. But yeah, it was enough for me. And Ricciardo, I thought a very good performance in that Renault, fighting alone against him.
Who's your driver of the day?
It's Sergio Perez. Sergio Perez is the driver of the day. Started P17, was lightning. He was in a different race. I think he was lapping quicker than the Mercedes at points in the race. He was, because he was literally at one stage when he was chasing, I think, Alexander Albon. It was literally like fastest lap, fastest lap, fastest lap. And, you know, a Red Bull that started in, well, P5 was it? I think it was for Alex Albon. Because, he had to get past Carlos Sainz.
Yeah, Bottas. Well, yeah.
Well, yeah, Bottas was obviously in front of him.
Yeah.
But, you know, Albon had a pretty uneventful race. He closed him down. And like Albon was under no pressure really from anyone else in terms of it wouldn't have been him pushing his tyres until Sergio Perez came. And then it's a shame that he didn't finish 5th and it was just kind of close but not quite. But I think Racing Point want to make a statement in terms of if Sergio Perez had gone from 17th and genuinely on pace overtaken the Red Bull of Alexander Albon, that would have been a serious statement from Racing Point in terms of how good their car is this year. We've already spoken about, obviously, there may be repercussions that might follow with the legality of the car, but I believe it probably is going to be deemed as legal, and they're very clever, that team, and a very underrated factory team on there. But Sergio was saying, and he had the overtake of the race for me. The battle of the race was the Max Verstappen-Bottas moment. That was incredible.
Yeah.
In terms of Max looked like he lost the position, then went round the outside of turn 4, going wheel to wheel, had the inside line through turn 5 and 6, and that was great to watch. But Sergio Perez, Carlos Sainz was all over the back of him out of the pits. He overtakes him. Then Sergio Perez goes round the outside of turn 4 on him. Well, no, he didn't. No, Carlos Sainz overtook into turn 4, didn't he? And then Sergio Perez goes round the outside of like turn 6.
No, turn 5.
Turn 5, and
it was unbelievable.
Jeez.
He certainly brought the entertainment. For a race that didn't have as much drama than last week, Sergio was bringing that X factor through most of it.
But for me, he was the clear drive of the day. He was the excitement. He was the one that got me on the edge of my seat and just looking at the kind of overtakes and going, go on, Checo, making it through. Yes, I do have a soft spot for Sergio Perez, but still, in terms of
17th to 6th, you can't argue with that.
It is an incredible performance, definitely. But race rating, to round this off.
Rate your race.
Rate your race. But yeah, the race rating. Look, we gave 10 out of 10 to week 1. And I think it was just excited everyone to be back. And the drama, it had a little bit of everything. Race 1. Race 2 was a little bit more predictable. Still with excitement. I actually genuinely think that the on-track battles and the overtakes, the quality of driving on display in race 2 was higher.
Yeah,
and obviously the qualifying as well.
Yeah. But it did have a bit less drama. It was no challenge up top. So going for a 7 out of 10?
Yeah, I was very tempted to go 8 out of 10 just because of the quality of the overtaking. But I suppose there was a lot of impact stuff. There was overtakes in pit stops. Some of the overtakes, like Bottas and Verstappen, yes, they had that battle, but then the actual overtake was fairly easy.
Yeah. In
terms of it. Perez working his way through the field. I suppose we forgot to talk about Lance Stroll and Daniel Ricciardo. Well, you kind of did, didn't you?
We touched on the defensive display from Ricciardo, yeah.
Yeah, so there was still plenty of on-screen action, and obviously the Ferraris, Leclerc, all over the back of Vettel with that extra pace and tyre in the rear wing. It did have a little bit of drama, but it's probably just needed a little bit more. So we'll go for a solid 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Not bad at all.
Not bad at all, indeed. But that's it from us, guys. That is the end of our kind of review process. I know, obviously, in fantasy, we'll review the Styrian Grand Prix as well as looking ahead to the Hungary GP because it's a triple header.
Oh, yeah.
So it's race week again, everybody. But yeah, this is probably our proper full round off of the Styrian Grand Prix. We're now kind of leaving Austria behind and heading over to Budapest and Hungary, and hopefully for some more great racing. But comment down below what you thought of it, what you thought of the teams, who's kind of standing out, what are the kind of debates to kind of have about from the race weekend. Where do you think everyone is standing? We're now starting to get a clearer picture of everyone is. Where do you think that kind of Racing Point out protest is going to have outcome? I think it's probably going to go in favour of Racing Point, but we shall certainly see on that front. But if you're new around here, or you haven't done so already, Stephen?
They can like, they can subscribe, and they can ding that bell.
Ding that bell. But that's it from us, guys. So for now, you F1 fans, keep racing!